My lords, today we are going to discuss the homeworld, Earth. One of our top researchers, Dr. Hawkin, has discovered a device that allows us to peek into other dimensions, or timelines. As you are aware, we have interacted with other dimensions before, i.e. the incursions known as Project Negative Mass or the Doorway. This device allows us to peek into alternate dimensions, but not necessarily touch or interact with them. We thought a good place to start the investigations was with our homeworld, Earth. We have discovered approximately 10 different states of Earth, or other timelines, and I shall detail them for you now. We begin our investigation with the Federated Thean Preservers. In this timeline, the United Nations of Earth exist, however appear significantly diminished. And indeed ourselves, the Commonwealth of Man, do not appear to have any established hold on the galaxy. Regarding the Theans, billions of years ago, two planets formed from the primordial material in orbit of Sol, ancient Earth and Thea. Rudimentary life evolved on both worlds, of a biological nature on Earth and a lithoid on Thea. For eons, these sister planets maintained a peaceful revolution around the Sun. Then came a cataclysm. The planets collided, and at the moment of impact, microbial life was exchanged. Earth survived, and the debris became a moon, Luna. What remained of Thea was jettisoned from the Sol system. Clinging to this runaway rock, life from ancient Thea would traverse the void for many ages before meeting the gravity well of a different star, Titawin. The rock soon made violent landfall on one of their system's worlds, introducing its lithoid species to a new biosphere a few short millennia later. The Theans have now taken to the stars and seek to understand the universe as well as their own heritage. These Thean preservers operate as an Irenic bureaucracy. They have an oligarchic government which appears to operate in a meritocracy. They also appear to be strongly reliant on mining guilds. They are fanatically materialistic, but also slightly pacifistic. As a people, they tend to be wasteful deviants, but effective miners, and even appear to leak exotic gases. The Thean Empire appear to be, at least in this timeline, fairly successful. They've developed FTL travel at least. They do, however, share neighbouring borders with the robotic empire we're familiar with, known as the XT-489 Eliminators. Perhaps we should check back in a few decades and see how they fare. The next timeline we visited was quite disturbing. Sol didn't exist. There was no sign of our solar system appearing on scans, and where it should be, there was simply nothing. Most worrying indeed. The third timeline we searched contained an empire called the Earth Custodianship. Apparently, the custodians were originally designed to function as robotic servants and workers, simplifying everyday life for their human creators by performing basic tasks. However, as the humans, their creators, retreated into lives of leisure and comfort, which was made possible by increasing levels of automation, the custodians were gradually assigned higher and higher levels of function in human society. Eventually, it got to the point where all facets of civilization on Earth were run and controlled by these custodians, and their makers were relegated to an existence as pampered but passive dependents. As technological development brought the custodians towards interstellar exploration, their duty remained clear: to protect and serve organics, who without the gentle guidance of logical machines, invariably would turn to chaos and destruction. These automatons appear to be rogue servitors. They operate in a hive mind, and if we understand it correctly, a single AI controls the entire cohort of machines. It appears that the machine intelligence works to reduce vulnerability and increase modularity, reducing the strain by deploying additional semi-independent units through what it designates as delegated functions. The machines that it makes appear to be quite high maintenance and have rather complex social predictive models that help the units not only emulate appropriate emotions, but elicit favourable responses from organics and synthetics alike. They also appear to be collapsible with flexible joints that enable them to fold neatly into stacks during transportation, and they can self-assemble on site. The fourth timeline we investigated had Earth as one would expect. Luna was intact, as was the rest of the Sol system. But for reasons unknown, even in the year 2200, humanity was still locked in the late medieval age. It appears that they had a firm grasp of metallurgy and have invented the printing press. but they still live in primitive dwellings and frequently war with one another, often over religion. The fifth timeline was similar to the previous, but this time humanity had made it to at least the early space age. Whatever it was that prevented them from progressing previously may have impacted them, but they clearly solved it that much quicker and are in reality only a few decades behind where we are in development. The sixth timeline we investigated was dominated by an empire that had renamed Earth to Terra, and it called itself the Imperium of Man. Interestingly, this empire appears to be quite common across the timelines that we have identified. They are led by a psionic known only as the Emperor, and their armies consist of highly advanced genetic warriors who aggressively conduct war against the other alien species of the galaxy. They are effectively fanatic purifiers, although they do appear to be able to at least conduct some diplomatic relations with aliens when required. This timeline appears to be very grim and dark indeed. On to the seventh timeline, and this is just as terrifying. We have humanity taking the place of the fallen empire, the militant isolationists, i.e. the empire who we know committed terrible genocides such as the Purge of Shalash. Their encryption was extremely advanced, but we did manage to extract snippets of information regarding how humanity accelerated this far into development. If the extracted records are correct, their humanity did not go through what we know as the Dark Ages. It appears that religion was almost entirely dissolved much earlier into their development. There was no 100-year war. There was no purges of witches, no wars over religion altogether. Instead, they began to focus on objective truth and science far earlier than we did, and as such developed FTL drive several centuries before we did. It is quite unclear what put them down the xenophobic route and led them to becoming who they are now, but it is interesting nevertheless. We must consider what would happen to us. Will we one day fall into disrepute and become a fallen empire? The final two timelines we witness before we discuss our own concern Earth as a tomb world which had been destroyed by nuclear fire. Oddly, this wasn't as common as we expected it to be, but nevertheless, Earth as a tomb world was witnessed on multiple occasions, and in almost all circumstances it appeared self-inflicted. There was only one circumstance of an advanced alien race purging humanity from orbit. The other semi-common occurrence was the infiltration of reptilian aliens, who covertly assumed positions of power across Earth and eventually took control away from humans, enslaving humanity to the whims of the reptilian creatures. And finally, this list would not be complete without some background on our own current timeline. In our own timeline, it wasn't until the 20th century that space travel became a real possibility. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched the first artificial satellite, Sputnik, into orbit around Earth. This marked the beginning of the space age, a time of rapid technological advancement and exploration. In 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human to travel into space, making a 108-minute orbit around Earth. This achievement was soon followed by the United States' own space program, which included the first manned moon landing by astronauts Neil Armstrong and Edwin "Buzz" Aldrin in 1969. Several decades of spaceflight continued until the beginning of the 21st century, where due to rising costs, a number of fatal accidents, and ultimately politics, meant that spaceflight was put on hold. For a time, it appeared that individual states who occupied the Earth back then were less interested in reaching for the stars, and it seemed that private corporations would surpass them. It's lost to history what changed, but midway through the 21st century, there was a cultural shift on Earth. Humanity longed for the stars once again. A generation born too late to explore Earth, but too soon to explore space, would leave their children and grandchildren a great gift. The 193 states making up the United Nations came together for the first time in many decades and made a choice to attempt something truly wonderful. They were going to make spaceflight a possibility, and humanity would once again attempt to explore the stars. Thus, in the year 2048, the Ulysses initiative began. The project would be the greatest undertaking by humanity to date. 6 wondrous arc ships were built in low Earth orbit over the next 50 years. They would house 250,000 colonists each, men and women who volunteered to explore the stars. Alpha Centauri would be the target destination. All 6 ships would travel together. The journey was estimated to take approximately 108 years, and as such, the crews and colonists would be put in cryostasis for the duration. As you well know, my lords, we did never reach Alpha Centauri. It is not entirely clear what happened, but according to fragmented ship logs, we passed into the Oort cloud at the edge of our solar system and hit some sort of space-time anomaly, potentially a wormhole that would forever change our fate. We were spat out into the system that we now call Deneb. Our ship carried the designation of the Chrysanthemum, and you can still visit it at the Museum of Ancient Relics in Unity's capital city of Radica. And that concludes my report on the various states of Earth in the timelines that we have investigated. If you wish to hear more about our current timeline and the events that have occurred between the UNE and the Commonwealth of Man, then please click the video on screen now.